The wagon wheels groaned against the dry earth as Martha Bennett pulled hard on the reins, her knuckles white beneath the dust that coated everything she owned. And when she finally brought the horses to a halt at what appeared to be some kind of territorial boundary marker, she wondered if this was truly where her journey would end, or if crossing this invisible line would lead to something she had never dared to imagine. The sun hung low in the western sky, painting the rugged landscape of the Oregon Territory in shades of amber and gold. It was late August in 1868, and Martha had been traveling for 3 months straight from Independence, Missouri, following the Oregon Trail with a determination born from desperation and hope in equal measure. Her father had died of cholera 2 weeks into the journey, and her mother had succumbed to pneumonia just outside of Fort Laramie. At 22 years old, Martha found herself alone with a wagon full of belongings, 2 tired horses, and a land claim deed her father had purchased before his death. The boundary marker was nothing more than a weathered wooden post with faded lettering that she could barely make out in the fading light. She squinted at it, trying to determine if she had reached the edge of the property her father had claimed, or if this was some other kind of territorial division. Her horses snorted and stamped, eager for water and rest, but Martha hesitated. She had heard stories about claim jumpers, about settlers who shot first and asked questions later when strangers crossed onto their land. That was when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching from the west, coming fast across the open plain. Martha's heart hammered in her chest as she reached beneath the wagon seat for her father's old rifle, her hands trembling as she checked to ensure it was loaded. The rider came into view moments later, silhouetted against the setting sun, and as he drew closer, she could make out the details of a tall man on a powerful chestnut horse, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and a long duster coat that flapped behind him like wings. He slowed his horse to a walk as he approached, raising one hand in a gesture that seemed meant to convey he meant no harm. Martha kept the rifle pointed at the ground but kept her finger near the trigger, watching him with wary eyes as he came to a stop about 20 feet from her wagon. "Evening, miss," he called out, his voice deep and carrying easily across the distance between them. "You look lost." "I am not lost," Martha replied, keeping her voice steady despite the fear that made her want to climb back into the wagon and hide. "I am looking for the Bennett claim. My father purchased land here." The man dismounted from his horse with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. As he walked closer, leading his horse by the reins, Martha could see him more clearly. He was probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that fell to his collar beneath his hat, and a face that was sun-bronzed and handsome in a rugged sort of way. His eyes were a striking shade of gray-blue, and they regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "The Bennett claim," he repeated, stopping a respectful distance from her wagon. "That would be the section about 3 miles west of here, bordering my family's ranch. I am Lucas Reynolds. My father owns the Double R Ranch, which runs along the northern edge of this valley." Martha lowered the rifle slightly, though she did not set it aside. "Martha Bennett," she said. "My father bought the claim 6 months ago. He received a deed and everything was supposedly arranged." Lucas pushed his hat back on his head, revealing more of his face. There was something honest about his features, something that made Martha want to trust him, though she had learned to be cautious during her long journey west. Too many people had tried to take advantage of a woman traveling alone. "I remember when that land was sold," Lucas said slowly. "My father mentioned it. Good farmland with a creek running through it and some timber for building. But miss, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but that is a hard piece of ground to work alone. Do you have family coming behind you?" The question hung in the air between them, and Martha felt her throat tighten with grief that was still too fresh, too raw. She shook her head, unable to form the words for a moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "They are gone. Both of them. I am all that is left." Lucas's expression softened, and he took another step closer. "I am sorry," he said, and there was genuine sympathy in his voice. "The trail takes too many good people. But miss, you cannot stay out here on the boundary line. The sun is setting and you need shelter and water. Your horses look about done in." Martha looked at her horses, seeing them properly for the first time in hours. He was right. They were exhausted, their heads hanging low, their flanks dark with sweat and dust. She had been so focused on reaching her destination that she had pushed them too hard. "I do not want to trespass," she said. "If you could just point me in the right direction, I can make it to my land before full dark." Lucas shook his head firmly. "Not going to happen, and I would not be much of a neighbor if I let you try. Listen, Miss Bennett. I know you do not know me from Adam, but I am offering you genuine hospitality here. Cross into my land, and you will never feel unwelcome again. You can stay at our ranch tonight, rest your horses, get a hot meal, and in the morning I will take you to your claim myself and help you get situated. My mother would skin me alive if she knew. I let a lady spend the night out here alone when we have a perfectly good ranch house with spare rooms." Martha studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or ill intent. But all she saw was honest concern and a kindness that reminded her painfully of her father. She was so tired, so worn down from months of travel and grief and the constant strain of being alone. The thought of a real bed, a hot meal, and the company of other people was almost overwhelming. "I do not want to impose," she said, but even as she spoke, she could hear the weakness in her own protest. "It is not an imposition," Lucas assured her. "It is what neighbors do out here. We look after each other because if we do not, no one else will. Now, why do not you let me tie my horse to the back of your wagon and I will drive your team to the ranch house? You look about ready to fall off that seat." It was true. Martha was exhausted, every muscle in her body aching from the long day of travel. She hesitated for only a moment longer before nodding. "All right," she agreed. "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I appreciate your kindness." "Lucas," he corrected with a small smile. "We do not stand much on formality out here. And it is my pleasure, Martha. May I call you Martha?" "Yes," she said, and found herself returning his smile despite her exhaustion and weariness. There was something about him that put her at ease, something warm and genuine that she had not encountered in a long time. Lucas quickly tied his horse to the back of the wagon, and then climbed up onto the seat beside her. Martha moved over to give him room, very aware of his presence beside her as he took up the reins. He had a comfortable confidence about him, the kind that came from a man who knew his place in the world and was secure in it. "Your horses have good lines," he commented as he urged them into motion. "Missouri bred, Kentucky, actually," Martha replied. "My father was particular about his horses. He said they would need to be strong and steady for the journey west. He was right about that. They have carried you far. They just need some rest and good feed and they will be fine." Lucas guided the wagon expertly across the rough terrain, heading west toward a line of cottonwood trees that marked what must be a creek or river. "How was your journey? Besides the losses, I mean. Any trouble with Indians or bandits?" "Some," Martha admitted. "We traveled with a wagon train most of the way, which helped. There were a few tense moments crossing through Sioux territory, but the wagon master negotiated passage and we got through without violence. After Fort Boise, I continued on alone. Most of the other families were heading further north or down into California." Lucas glanced at her with what looked like respect. That took courage, traveling alone like that. A lot of people would not have had the nerve. It was not courage, Martha said quietly. It was stubbornness. My father used to say I was the most stubborn person he had ever met. Once I set my mind to something, I see it through, no matter what. That is a good quality to have out here, Lucas said. You will need it, running a homestead on your own. Though I hope you will not be too stubborn to accept help when you need it. My father always says that neighbors are the most valuable thing you can have on the frontier. They rode in companionable silence for a while, and Martha found herself studying Lucas's profile in the fading light. He had strong features, with a straight nose and a firm jawline that was shadowed with several days' worth of beard. His hands on the reins were capable and work roughened, and there was an easy strength about him that made her feel safe for the first time in months. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise, and Martha caught her breath at the sight of it. It was larger than she had expected, a sprawling structure built from timber and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and side. There were several outbuildings scattered around it, including a large barn, a stable, and what looked like a bunkhouse. Smoke rose from the chimney, and warm lamplight glowed in the windows, making the whole scene look welcoming and homey. "It is beautiful," Martha said softly. "My father built it 15 years ago when he first claimed this land," Lucas explained, pride evident in his voice. "Started with just a small cabin, but as the ranch prospered, he added on. Now it is home for him, my mother, my 2 younger brothers, and me. My sister got married last year and moved to Oregon City with her husband." As they approached the house, the front door opened and a woman stepped out onto the porch. She was in her late 40s, Martha guessed, with dark hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple dress with an apron over it, and her face lit up with curiosity as she saw the wagon approaching. "Lucas," she called out, "you did not say you were bringing company." "Did not know I was until about 20 minutes ago, Ma," Lucas called back as he brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house. He jumped down and then turned to offer Martha his hand. "This is Martha Bennett. She is here to claim the property that borders our south pasture. I found her stopped at the boundary line, looking about done in, so I invited her to stay the night." Martha accepted his hand and climbed down from the wagon, her legs shaky after the long day of sitting. Lucas's mother hurried down the porch steps, her face full of warm welcome. "Martha Bennett. Of course, your father wrote to my husband about purchasing that land. We were so pleased to know we would have neighbors. But where is your family, dear?" "Ma," Lucas said gently, and something in his tone made his mother's expression shift from welcoming to sympathetic. "Oh, you poor thing," she said, reaching out to take both of Martha's hands in hers. "Come inside right now. You look like you have not had a decent meal or a good rest in ages. I am Lucas Reynolds, and you are welcome in our home for as long as you need. Lucas, you see to her horses." "I will get Martha settled." Before Martha could protest or even properly thank her, Lucas had swept her up the porch steps and into the house. The interior was warm and inviting, with sturdy furniture and colorful rugs on the wooden floors. The smell of cooking food made Martha's stomach growl audibly, reminding her that she had eaten nothing but jerky and hardtack for the past 2 days. "When did you last eat a hot meal?" Lucas asked, leading her through a comfortable sitting room toward what appeared to be the kitchen. I am not sure," Martha admitted. "A few days ago, maybe. I have been trying to make good time, so I have not stopped to cook much." Lucas made a tusking sound and guided Martha to a chair at a large wooden table. "You sit right there and do not move. I am going to fix you a proper plate, and then we will get you into a bath and a clean bed. You look about ready to collapse." Martha wanted to protest, to say that she could take care of herself, but the kindness in Eleanor's voice and the genuine concern in her eyes made the words die in her throat. Instead, she found herself blinking back tears, overwhelmed by the simple comfort of being cared for by another woman after so many weeks alone. Eleanor seemed to understand without Martha having to say a word. She squeezed Martha's shoulder gently before bustling around the kitchen, filling a plate with roasted chicken, potatoes, carrots, and fresh bread. When she set it in front of Martha, along with a glass of cold milk, Martha had to swallow hard against the lump in her throat. "Thank you," she managed to say. "You are very kind." "Nonsense," Eleanor said briskly, though her eyes were kind. "This is what people do for each other out here. Now eat up before it gets cold." Martha ate slowly at first, her stomach having shrunk from weeks of inadequate meals, but the food was so good that she found herself finishing the entire plate. As she ate, Eleanor moved around the kitchen, preparing what looked like ingredients for tomorrow's breakfast, and keeping up a steady stream of gentle conversation that required little response from Martha. Lucas came in just as Martha was finishing her meal, his hat in his hands and his hair mussed from work. "Horses are settled in the stable," he reported. "They are eating their heads off right now. I will give them a good rub-down once they have finished eating." "Thank you," Martha said, looking up at him, "for everything. I do not know how to repay your kindness." "No repayment needed," Lucas assured her. "Like I said, this is what neighbors do. Besides, I have a feeling you will return the favor someday when we need it. That is how things work out here." The front door opened again, and 3 men trooped in, their boots loud on the wooden floor. They all had variations of the same features as Lucas, marking them clearly as family. The oldest was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 50s with gray streaked hair and the same gray-blue eyes as Lucas. The other 2 were younger, probably around 18 and 20, with the gangly build of young men still growing into their frames. "Pa, Jamie Cole, this is Martha Bennett," Lucas introduced. "She is claiming the property to our south." "Martha, this is my father, Lawrence Reynolds, and my brothers, James and Cole." Lawrence Reynolds had a commanding presence, but his face was kind as he nodded to Martha. "Miss Bennett, welcome to the Double R. Lucas told me your family had purchased that land. I am sorry to see you have arrived alone." "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds," Martha said, standing from her chair out of respect. "And thank you for your hospitality. I promise I will be out of your way first thing in the morning." "You will do no such thing," Eleanor interjected firmly. "You will stay at least a few days while we help you get your homestead started. A woman alone cannot build a cabin and establish a farm by herself, and it would be foolish to try." Martha opened her mouth to protest, her stubborn independence rising up, but Lawrence held up a hand. "My wife is right, Miss Bennett. And before you start arguing about charity or handouts, let me make something clear. Out here, we help our neighbors not out of pity but out of mutual necessity. Today, you need help. Tomorrow, maybe we will need yours. That is how communities survive on the frontier. So you will accept our help in the spirit it is offered, and when the time comes that we need assistance, you will provide it in return. Fair?" Put that way, Martha could hardly refuse. She nodded slowly. "Fair," she agreed. "Thank you, all of you." Over the next hour, Martha met the rest of the household, including the ranch cook, a grizzled old man named Pete who had been with the family since Lawrence first established the ranch, and 2 ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. Eleanor showed Martha to a small but comfortable guest room upstairs, with a real bed covered in a beautiful quilt and a washstand with a porcelain basin. "There is hot water heating on the stove," Eleanor said. "I will have the boys bring up the tub and fill it for you. You take a nice long bath and wash away the trail dust, and then you get yourself into that bed and sleep as long as you need to. We will talk more in the morning." Martha did exactly that. The bath was pure heaven, washing away months of accumulated grime and exhaustion. She washed her hair 3 times before it finally felt clean, and by the time she climbed into the soft bed, wearing a clean nightgown that a leaner had provided, she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. But before she drifted off to sleep, she found herself thinking about Lucas Reynolds and the kindness in his gray-blue eyes, and the way his presence had made her feel safe for the first time since her father died. The next morning, Martha woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon wafting up from downstairs. For a moment, she was disoriented, forgetting where she was, but then memory returned and she sat up quickly, alarmed that she had overslept. Based on the angle of the sun, it was probably mid-morning, and she had intended to be up at dawn. She dressed quickly in one of her worn traveling dresses, wishing she had something nicer to wear, and hurried downstairs. The kitchen was empty except for Alina, who was kneading bread dough at the counter. "Good morning, dear," Alina said cheerfully. "I hope you slept well." "Too well," Martha said ruefully. "I did not mean to sleep so late. Where is everyone? The men are out working." "This is a cattle ranch, so there is always work to be done. But Lucas said to tell you that when you woke up, he would take you over to your property so you can see it properly." Alina wiped her hands on her apron and gestured to the table. "Sit down and have some breakfast first. There is coffee in the pot, and I kept some bacon and eggs warm for you." Martha sat and accepted the plate Alina prepared for her, marveling at the simple luxury of a hot breakfast she had not had to cook herself. "You have all been so kind," she said. "I am not sure what I would have done if Lucas had not found me last night." "You would have managed," Alina said confidently. "You have that look about you, the kind that says you can handle whatever comes your way. But there is no shame in accepting help, especially from friends. And I hope we will be friends, Martha. It will be nice to have another woman nearby. I love my family dearly, but sometimes a woman needs female company, you know." "I do know," Martha agreed, thinking of how much she had missed her mother during the long journey. "And I would like that very much." They talked while Martha ate, and she learned more about the Reynolds family and their ranch. Lawrence had come west from Virginia after the Mexican-American War, looking for a fresh start and new opportunities. He had worked as a ranch hand for several years, saving every penny, until he had enough to purchase his own land and cattle. Alina had been a schoolteacher in Oregon City when they met, and she had given up teaching to become a rancher's wife, though she still kept books on hand and taught reading to any children in the area who wanted to learn. Lucas and his siblings had all been born on the ranch, raised to be tough and self-sufficient, but also kind and community-minded. Lucas, as the eldest, was being groomed to eventually take over the ranch, though Alina said her son also had dreams of breeding horses, which he pursued in his spare time. "He has a good eye for horses," Alina said with maternal pride. "And a way with them, too. Animals trust him. People trust him. He is a good man, my Lucas." Martha found herself agreeing, though she barely knew him. There had been something about him last night, something solid and dependable, that had made her feel like she could trust him completely despite having just met him. After breakfast, Martha helped Alina clean up the dishes, and then she went outside to find Lucas. He was in the stable, currying his chestnut horse, and he looked up with a smile when she entered. "Morning," he said. "You look better, more rested." "I feel better," Martha admitted. "That was the best night's sleep I have had in months. Thank you again for your hospitality." "My pleasure. You ready to see your land?" "Very ready." Lucas saddled his horse and then helped Martha hitch up her wagon team. Her horses looked much better after a night of rest and good feed, their eyes brighter and their movements more energetic. As they prepared to leave, Lawrence came riding in from the range with Jamie and Cole. "Heading to the Bennett place?" Lawrence asked Lucas. "Yes, sir. Going to show Martha her property and help her figure out where to set up camp." Lawrence nodded approvingly. "Good. Take Jamie with you. You will need extra hands if you are going to help her get started. Cole and I can manage things here for the day." Jamie, who was the younger of the two brothers at 18, brightened at the prospect of being included. He quickly saddled a horse and joined them, and the small party set out across the range toward Martha's property. The ride took about half an hour, and as they traveled, Lucas pointed out various landmarks and features of the landscape. The land here was beautiful in a wild, untamed way, with rolling grasslands dotted with stands of pine and cottonwood, and mountains rising in the distance. A creek sparkled in the morning sun, its banks lined with willows and wildflowers. "That creek runs through both our properties," Lucas explained. "It never runs dry, even in the hottest part of summer. That was one of the reasons my father thought your land was such a good purchase. Water is everything out here." When they finally reached the boundaries of Martha's claim, she caught her breath at the sight of it. It was even more beautiful than she had imagined from her father's descriptions. The land was a mixture of meadow and forest, with the creek running right through the middle of it. There was a gentle slope down to the water, perfect for building and plenty of timber for construction. "Oh," she breathed, "it is perfect." Lucas smiled at her reaction. "It is good land," he agreed. "Your father chose well. The soil is rich, good for crops. There is plenty of grass for livestock if you decide to keep cattle or horses. And that stand of timber there will provide all the wood you need for building." They spent the next few hours exploring the property, with Lucas and Jamie helping Martha identify the best spot for a cabin. They chose a location on a slight rise overlooking the creek, with good drainage and protection from the prevailing winds. There was a flat area nearby that would be perfect for a barn or stable, and the meadow beyond would make excellent pasture. As they worked, Martha found herself increasingly aware of Lucas's presence. He was patient and knowledgeable, explaining things without being condescending, and he seemed genuinely interested in her opinions and ideas. More than once, their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary, and Martha felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with exertion. By midday, they had staked out the corners of where the cabin should go and marked several trees that would need to be felled for timber. Jamie had wandered off to explore the creek, giving Martha and Lucas a few moments of relative privacy. "It is going to be a lot of work," Lucas said, standing beside her and looking at the marked-out cabin site. "But it will be worth it. This will be a good home, Martha." "I hope so," she said softly. "It is what my father wanted, a fresh start, a place to build something lasting." "I wish he could have seen it." Lucas turned to look at her, his expression sympathetic. "Tell me about him. What was he like?" Martha was surprised by the question, but she found herself wanting to answer. "He was a good man, strong but gentle. He loved my mother with his whole heart, and he loved me just as much. We had a small farm in Missouri, but it failed after several bad harvests. That is why he decided to come west to try again somewhere new. He was so excited about it, so full of hope. And then—" Her voice trailed off and she felt tears prick her eyes. Lucas reached out and gently took her hand, his touch warm and comforting. "He would be proud of you," Lucas said quietly, "for finishing what he started, for being strong enough to see it through alone. That takes real courage, Martha." She looked up at him, finding his gray-blue eyes fixed on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I do not feel courageous," she admitted. "Most of the time I just feel scared and alone." "You are not alone," Lucas said firmly. "Not anymore. You have neighbors now, friends." People who will stand with you no matter what comes. I meant what I said last night. You crossed into my land and you will never feel unwelcome again. Not on my ranch and not in this valley. I promise you that." The sincerity in his voice and the warmth in his eyes made Martha's heart beat faster. She realized suddenly that she was still holding his hand, and that neither of them had made any move to pull away. There was something happening between them, something that went beyond simple neighborly kindness, and it both thrilled and terrified her. Before she could say anything, Jamie came crashing back through the brush, his face excited. "Lucas, you have got to see this. There is a beaver dam downstream, and it has created the prettiest little pond you have ever seen. It would be perfect for fishing." The moment between Martha and Lucas broke, and he released her hand with what looked like reluctance. "A beaver pond. Well, that is good news for you, Martha. Fresh fish whenever you want them." They spent another hour exploring the property before Lucas suggested they head back to the ranch for lunch. On the ride back, Martha found herself riding beside Lucas, with Jamie ranging ahead on his horse, and they fell into easy conversation about her plans for the homestead. "I will need to build a cabin before winter," Martha said. "That is my first priority. Then a barn or at least a stable for my horses. After that, I can think about planting crops next spring." "Building a cabin is a big job," Lucas said carefully. "Have you ever done any construction work?" Martha laughed. "No, but I am a quick learner, and I am not afraid of hard work." "I do not doubt that for a second. But maybe you would accept some help. My father could spare me and Jamie for a few days, and we could get the basic structure up for you. We have done plenty of building on the ranch, so we know what we are doing. It would go faster and be done right." Martha's stubborn independence wanted to refuse, to insist she could do it herself, but she was learning that out here. Accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but rather good sense. "I would appreciate that," she said. "Thank you, Lucas. You and your family have been more generous than I could have ever hoped for." "It is what neighbors do," Lucas said, but the look he gave her suggested that maybe, just maybe, it was starting to become something more than that. Over the next 2 weeks, Martha settled into a routine that was both exhausting and exhilarating. She spent her days at her property, working alongside Lucas, Jamie, and sometimes Lawrence and Cole to build her cabin. The Reynolds men taught her how to fell trees properly, how to strip and notch logs, how to fit them together to create strong, weatherproof walls. It was back-breaking work, and Martha went to bed each night at the Reynolds ranch house, where a leaner had insisted she continue to stay, with muscles aching and hands blistered. But there was a deep satisfaction in watching the cabin take shape, in knowing that she was building something with her own 2 hands that would stand for years to come. And there was Lucas. He was there every day, working beside her, teaching her, encouraging her when she got frustrated, and celebrating with her when they achieved each small milestone. They talked about everything under the sun as they worked, learning about each other's lives and dreams and fears. Martha learned that Lucas loved this land with a fierce passion, that he dreamed of raising horses that would be known throughout the territory for their quality and strength. Lucas learned that Martha had always wanted to be a teacher like her mother, who had taught her to read and write and love books, but that she had given up that dream to help her father on their farm in Missouri. "You could still teach," Lucas said one afternoon as they were taking a break from work, sitting in the shade of a pine tree and drinking cool water from the creek. "Once there are more families in the area, they will need a school. You could start one." "Maybe," Martha said, but she said it in a way that suggested she was actually considering the possibility, not just dismissing it out of hand. As the days passed, Martha became increasingly aware of the growing attraction between her and Lucas. It was there in the way his hand would linger on hers when he passed her a tool, in the way his eyes would seek her out across the work site, in the way he found excuses to stand close to her. And she knew he felt it too, could see it in the way he looked at her when he thought she was not paying attention, with a warmth and hunger that made her pulse race. But neither of them spoke of it directly. It seemed too soon, too presumptuous, even though Martha found herself thinking about Lucas constantly, dreaming about him at night, wondering what it would be like to have those strong, gentle hands touch her not just in passing but with intention. Eleanor noticed, of course. Women always noticed such things. She began making small comments, casual observations about what a good man her son was, how he would make some lucky woman a fine husband someday, how nice it was to see him so happy and engaged with life. Martha tried not to read too much into these comments, but she could not help the hope that bloomed in her chest at the thought that maybe, just maybe, Lucas felt the same way about her that she was beginning to feel about him. The cabin was nearly complete, with just the roof left to finish, when trouble came to the valley. It started with cattle going missing from the Reynolds ranch, just a few head at first, but then more. Lawrence and his sons spent long days riding the range, looking for signs of rustlers, but they found nothing definite. Then one evening, Lucas came back to the ranch house with his jaw tight and his eyes hard. "Someone has been on Martha's property," he announced. "I found tracks, evidence of a camp, at least 3 men, maybe 4. Martha felt a chill run down her spine. "Why would anyone be camping on my land? Could be drifters just passing through," Lawrence said, but he did not sound convinced. "Or it could be claim jumpers, testing to see if the property is really occupied. Martha, I do not think you should stay out there alone until we figure out what is going on." "I agree," Lucas said firmly. "You need to stay here at the ranch where it is safe." Martha wanted to argue, to insist that she would not be driven off her own property by unnamed threats, but she could see the genuine concern in Lucas's eyes and knew he was right. She was one woman alone, and if there were multiple men with bad intentions, she would be vulnerable. "All right," she agreed reluctantly. "But I do not want to be helpless. Teach me to shoot properly. My father showed me the basics, but I want to be able to defend myself if I need to." Lucas nodded approvingly. "That is a good idea. I will teach you tomorrow." True to his word, Lucas spent the next day teaching Martha to shoot. They set up targets behind the barn, and he patiently corrected her stance, her grip, her aim. He stood behind her, his arms around her to guide her hands on the rifle, and Martha found it difficult to concentrate on the lesson when all she could think about was the warmth of his body pressed against hers, the sound of his voice in her ear. "You are a natural," Lucas said after she had hit 3 targets in a row. "With a little more practice, you will be as good a shot as any man in the territory." "I hope I never have to use these skills on a person," Martha said, lowering the rifle, "but it is good to know I can if I have to." Lucas turned her to face him, his hands still resting lightly on her shoulders. "I will not let anyone hurt you, Martha. I promise you that." The intensity in his eyes, the protective fierceness in his voice, made Martha's heart skip. "Lucas," she said softly, not sure what she wanted to say but needing to say something. He seemed to understand without words. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks," he said quietly. "But Martha, I need you to know that you have become important to me, more important than I probably have any right to say at this point." "You have become important to me too," Martha whispered, her own hand coming up to cover his where it rested against her face. "Very important." Lucas leaned closer, his intention clear, and Martha closed her eyes, tilting her face up to meet him. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, But when Martha responded, pressing closer, it deepened into something that spoke of longing and desire and the beginning of something that could become love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I have wanted to do that since the first night I saw you," he admitted. "Sitting on that wagon seat, looking tired and scared but also determined and strong. You took my breath away, Martha Bennett." "You took mine too," Martha said with a soft laugh. "I thought you were some kind of guardian angel appearing out of the sunset to rescue me." "Not an angel, just a man who saw someone who needed help. But I am glad I was there, glad I found you." He kissed her again, shorter this time but no less sweet. "We should get back. Ma will be wondering where we are, and I do not want her reading us the riot act about propriety." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and when Alina saw them, she smiled knowingly but said nothing. That night at dinner, Martha caught her exchanging significant looks with Lawrence, and she knew that the whole family was aware that something had shifted between her and Lucas. The next day brought an end to the mystery of who had been on Martha's property. Cole came racing back to the ranch house in the early afternoon, his horse lathered and his face flushed with excitement and anger. "Pa, Lucas, we caught them. 3 men trying to drive off a dozen head of our cattle. We have them cornered in the North Canyon." The men mobilized quickly, grabbing rifles and mounting horses. Martha watched anxiously as they prepared to ride out, her heart in her throat when Lucas paused to kiss her quickly before swinging into his saddle. "Stay here with Ma," he said. "We will be back soon." But Martha was not the kind of woman to sit and wait helplessly. After the men had ridden off, she turned to Alina. "Do you know how to shoot?" Alina's eyes gleamed with understanding. "Better than most men, and I was thinking the exact same thing. If those rustlers somehow get past our men, we need to be ready to defend the ranch." They armed themselves and positioned themselves strategically, Alina at the front of the house and Martha at the back, where they could see anyone approaching. But as it turned out, their preparations were unnecessary. The men returned 2 hours later with 3 surly-looking prisoners tied to their saddles. "We are taking them into Oregon City to face the marshal," Lawrence announced. "Lucas, you stay here and keep watch on the ranch." "Martha, these men admitted they were planning to squat on your property and try to claim it was theirs by right of occupation. You being a woman alone, they figured you would not be able to fight them off." Martha felt a surge of anger at the casual dismissal, the assumption that she would be easy prey because of her gender. But she also felt a fierce gratitude toward the Reynolds family for standing with her, for treating her claim as seriously as they would treat that of any man. Lucas must have read her expression because after his father and brothers rode off with the prisoners, he came to stand beside her. "You all right?" "I am angry," Martha said honestly, "but also grateful. Without you and your family, those men might have succeeded in stealing my land." "They never would have succeeded," Lucas said firmly, "because you would have fought them and so would we. You are one of us now, Martha. This community protects its own." That night, after a tense day of worry and vigilance, Lucas asked Martha to walk with him. They strolled away from the house toward the creek, the night air cool and sweet with the smell of grass and wildflowers. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in silver light. "Martha," Lucas began, then seemed to struggle with his words. "I know it is soon. I know we have only known each other for a few weeks. But these last days, working beside you, getting to know you, have been the happiest I have had in a long time. You are strong and smart and brave, and you make me laugh, and you make me want to be a better man. I am falling in love with you, and I needed you to know that." Martha's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never expected this. When I came west, I thought I would be alone, building a new life by myself. But then I met you, and everything changed. You make me feel safe and valued and like I can do anything as long as you are beside me." Lucas pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and they stood like that for a long moment, just feeling the rightness of being together. Then he pulled back just enough to look down at her face in the moonlight. "Marry me, Martha. I know it is fast. I know people will say we are rushing, but out here, life is unpredictable. We have to grab happiness when we find it. Marry me, and we will build a life together. Your land and my ranch, we can combine them, make something even bigger and better. Or if you want to keep your land separate, we can do that too. I do not care about the details. I just know I want to spend my life with you." Tears streamed down Martha's face, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Reynolds. I would be honored to be your wife." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Martha felt like her heart would burst from happiness. Everything she had lost, all the grief and hardship of the journey west, suddenly felt like it had meaning. It had brought her here, to this man, to this moment, to this chance at a future brighter than anything she had imagined. When they returned to the house, hand in hand, Alina took one look at their faces and let out a whoop of joy that brought Lawrence and Jamie running. "They are engaged," she announced. "My son has finally found himself a wife." The celebration that followed was warm and heartfelt, with Alina immediately beginning to plan a wedding and Lawrence solemnly shaking Lucas's hand and welcoming Martha officially into the family. Even Jamie seemed pleased, joking that now he would have someone to help him gang up on Lucas when he got too bossy. They were married 3 weeks later in Oregon City, in a small church filled with their friends and neighbors. Martha wore a dress that Alina had helped her sew from fabric they had purchased in town, a beautiful cream-colored muslin with lace at the collar and cuffs. Lucas wore his best suit, and when he saw Martha walking down the aisle toward him, his face lit up with such love and joy that several of the women in attendance began crying. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with Martha and Lucas promising to love and cherish each other for as long as they both lived. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Lucas kissed Martha with a tenderness that made her knees weak, and she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. They spent their wedding night at a small hotel in Oregon City, finally alone together as husband and wife. Lucas was gentle and patient, mindful of Martha's inexperience, and he made sure that their first joining was about her pleasure as much as his own. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the bed, talking softly and making plans for their future. "We will finish your cabin," Lucas said, stroking her hair as she lay with her head on his chest. "It is too good to waste. We can use it as a guest house, or maybe one day our children will want to live there when they are old enough to have their own place." "Children," Martha said softly, smiling at the thought. "I would like that. A whole house full of them." "Then we will have a whole house full," Lucas promised. "Sons and daughters, and we will raise them to be strong and kind and to value family above all else." They returned to the ranch the next day to find that Lucas's family had prepared a surprise for them. The cabin on Martha's property was completely finished, with furniture moved in and curtains hung in the windows. There were even supplies stocked in the small kitchen area, and firewood stacked neatly beside the fireplace. "We thought you might want a place of your own to start your marriage," Alina explained, her eyes suspiciously bright. "You are always welcome at the main house, of course, but newlyweds need privacy." Martha hugged her mother-in-law tightly, overcome with gratitude for the acceptance and love this family had shown her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I could not have asked for a better family to marry into." Lucas and Martha settled into their new home and into married life with an ease that surprised them both. They woke each morning to the sound of birds and the creek, worked together on improving their property, and fell into bed each night exhausted but happy. Lucas continued to work on his father's ranch, but he also began seriously pursuing his dream of breeding horses, using a portion of Martha's land for pasture. Martha, for her part, began teaching reading and writing to the children of nearby homesteaders, holding classes in their cabin 3 times a week. It started with just 2 children, but word spread quickly, and soon she had 8 students of varying ages. Lucas built her a proper schoolroom as a Christmas present that first year, adding it onto the cabin as a separate room with a wood stove and proper desks. Their first year of marriage passed in a blur of work and love and the gradual building of a life together. They faced challenges, of course. There was a harsh winter that tested their preparations and a spring flood that damaged some of their fencing. But they faced each challenge together, leaning on each other and on the support of their family and neighbors. Martha discovered she was pregnant in the spring of their 2nd year of marriage, and Lucas's joy was boundless. He became even more protective than usual, insisting that she not overwork herself, though Martha laughingly told him she was pregnant, not made of glass. Alina was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandmother, and she spent hours with Martha, teaching her about pregnancy and childbirth and caring for infants. Their son was born in November of 1870, on a crisp autumn day when the leaves on the cottonwood trees were golden, and the air smelled of wood smoke and approaching winter. The birth was long and difficult, but Martha was strong, and with Alina and the local midwife attending her, she brought a healthy baby boy into the world. Lucas cried when he first held his son, tears streaming down his face as he looked at the tiny, perfect person they had created together. "He is beautiful," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "just like his mother." "We need to name him," Martha said, exhausted but elated as she watched her husband cradle their newborn. "Lawrence," Lucas said immediately. "After my father, if you agree, Lawrence Bennett Reynolds." "Lawrence," Martha repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Lawrence with the nickname Laurie. Welcome to the world, little Laurie." Becoming parents deepened the bond between Lucas and Martha even further. They took turns walking the floor with Laurie when he cried at night, worked together to figure out feeding and bathing and all the small mysteries of infant care. Lucas proved to be a devoted father, spending every spare moment with his son, singing to him and talking to him, and simply staring at him in wonder. The years that followed were full and rich. Martha and Lucas had 2 more children, a daughter they named Molly, born in 1872, and another son, Henry, born in 1874. Their home expanded to accommodate their growing family, with Lucas adding on rooms and a proper 2nd story. The horse breeding operation grew from a dream to a reality, with Reynolds horses becoming known throughout Oregon for their quality and spirit. Martha's school also grew, eventually becoming the official school for the entire valley, with Martha as the head teacher, and eventually hiring an assistant when the number of students exceeded what she could teach alone. She loved her work, loved seeing the light of understanding come into her students' eyes when they mastered a new concept. Lawrence Reynolds, Lucas's father, passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1878, and the ranch officially passed to Lucas's ownership, though he continued to run it with his brother's help. Alina remained in the main ranch house, now spending her days as a beloved grandmother to Lucas and Martha's children, and eventually to Jamie and Cole's children as well when they married and started families of their own. Through it all, through every joy and sorrow, triumph and setback, Lucas and Martha's love for each other only grew stronger. They still took walks together in the evenings when they could, still held hands like newlyweds, still looked at each other with the same warmth and desire that had sparked between them that first day when Lucas had found Martha stopped at the boundary line. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Martha back to that spot, that boundary marker where they had first met. It was still there, weathered and faded, but marking the same invisible line between properties that were now joined by marriage and love. "Do you remember what I said to you that night?" Lucas asked, holding both of her hands in his. "You said I should cross into your land, and I would never feel unwelcome again," Martha said, remembering that moment with perfect clarity despite the decade that had passed. "I meant it then, and I mean it even more now," Lucas said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Martha. You have made me happier than I ever dreamed possible. You have given me a family, a purpose, a reason to want to be the best man I can be. I love you more today than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you more 10 years from now than I do today." Martha reached up to cup his face, her eyes bright with tears. "You saved me that night, Lucas. Not just from being alone and scared, but from a future without you in it. I cannot imagine my life without you now. You are my home, my heart, my everything. I love you more than words can say." They kissed there, in the fading light of a summer evening, with the sound of the creek babbling nearby and the mountains rising in the distance, and it felt like coming full circle. From that first meeting to this moment, their love had grown and deepened and become the foundation on which they built their entire lives. They walked back to their home hand in hand, as they had done so many times before, to find their children playing in the yard and smoke rising from the chimney, marking the warm, welcoming home they had built together. Laurie, now 9 years old and looking more like his father every day, came running to meet them. "Ma, Pa, Aunt Alina sent over a cake for your anniversary. Can we have some after supper?" "Of course we can," Martha said, ruffling her son's hair. "Go tell your sister and brother to wash up. Supper will be ready soon." As Laurie raced off, Lucas pulled Martha close for another kiss. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For saying yes. For taking a chance on me. For building this beautiful life with me." Martha smiled, her heart full to bursting with love for this good, kind, wonderful man. "Thank you for finding me that night, for seeing me not as a burden or a problem to be solved, but as someone worth knowing, worth loving." "Always," Lucas promised. "From that first moment to my last breath, always." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing of their children. Laurie grew into a tall, strong young man with his father's gift with horses and his mother's quick mind. He took over much of the horse breeding operation, expanding it further and earning a reputation throughout the territory as one of the best horsemen around. Molly inherited her mother's love of teaching and her father's gentle patience. She helped Martha in the school, eventually taking over some of the younger classes, and there was talk that, when Martha was ready to retire, Molly would become the head teacher. Henry, the youngest, had his own dreams. He wanted to be a doctor, inspired by the physician in Oregon City who had saved his grandfather's life after a riding accident. And though it would mean years of schooling back east, Lucas and Martha supported his ambition fully. In 1885, Martha and Lucas celebrated their 17th wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, their extended family, and friends from all over the valley. The celebration was held at the main ranch house, which had become the gathering place for the entire community over the years. As Martha looked around at all the faces, at the life they had built, she felt a deep sense of contentment and gratitude. She thought about that scared, grieving young woman who had arrived at the boundary line 17 years ago, exhausted and alone and uncertain of her future. She thought about the man who had appeared out of the sunset and offered her kindness and help with no expectation of anything in return. Lucas appeared at her side, as if summoned by her thoughts, and slipped his arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am," Martha said, leaning into his embrace. "About how one moment, one meeting, one decision can change the entire course of a life." "I think about that too," Lucas admitted. "What if I had not ridden out that direction that evening? What if you had decided to press on instead of stopping at the boundary? What if we had never met?" "But we did meet," Martha said firmly. "And I believe we were meant to. Some things are just fate, Lucas. You and me, we were meant to find each other." "I believe that too," Lucas said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And I thank God every day that fate brought you to my land, to my life, to my heart." Their children grew and eventually began families of their own. Lori married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring valley, and they built a house on the far side of Martha's original property, continuing the horse breeding operation and starting a family. Molly married the new school teacher who came to assist at the school, a young man from Portland who had fallen in love with both Molly and the valley within weeks of arriving. Henry went east to medical school as planned, but he promised to return when his training was complete to practice medicine in Oregon City. Martha and Lucas became grandparents, and they found joy in this new role just as they had in all the others life had given them. They spoiled their grandchildren terribly, Eleanor always said with a laugh, but they also taught them the values that had guided their own lives: hard work, kindness, community, and the importance of family above all else. In 1890, 22 years after they had first met, Lucas and Martha sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. They were older now, with silver threading through their hair and lines etched on their faces by years of laughter and hard work, but when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people who had fallen in love at first sight. "I have been thinking," Lucas said slowly, "about the future. About what happens to all of this when we are gone." "That is a morbid topic for such a beautiful evening," Martha protested gently. "Not morbid, just practical. I want to make sure everything is settled, that our children know what we want. The ranch will go to Lori, of course, since he has been running it with me for years now. Molly has the school and her teaching. Henry will have his medical practice. But I want to make sure they understand that the most important legacy we leave them is not land or money or property. It is the values we have tried to live by. The importance of helping your neighbor, of standing up for what is right, of building a community that looks after its own." Martha took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "They understand that, Lucas. We have taught them well. They will carry on what we have started here. I know. I just want to make sure they know how proud I am of them, how proud I am of what we built together, you and I, this family, this home, this life. It is more than I ever dreamed possible." "It is more than I dreamed possible too," Martha agreed. "But we did it together. That is the secret, I think, facing everything together as partners, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating together during the good ones." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink below the horizon. Then Lucas turned to Martha with a smile. "You remember what you said to me years ago about how one moment can change the course of a life?" "I remember. I have been thinking about that. About how my entire life changed the moment I crested that rise and saw you sitting on your wagon at the boundary line. Everything good in my life stems from that moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Martha Reynolds." And I want you to know that if I had to do it all over again, I would not change a single thing. Every moment with you has been a gift." Martha felt tears prick her eyes, moved by his words as she always was by his expressions of love. "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me a home when I had lost mine. You gave me a family when I was alone. You gave me love when I needed it most. I would not change a single thing either, Lucas, not one moment of our life together." They kissed, soft and sweet, as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to emerge overhead. And sitting there on their porch, surrounded by the land they had worked and the life they had built, Martha and Lucas knew they were exactly where they were meant to be, with exactly who they were meant to be with, living the life they were meant to live. The years continued to roll by, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that are part of any long life. Alina passed away peacefully in 1893 at the age of 78, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her funeral was attended by half the territory, it seemed, as people came from miles around to pay their respects to a woman who had been a pillar of the community for decades. Jamie and Cole continued to work the ranch with Lucas and Lori, and both men had families of their own now, filling the valley with Reynolds' children and grandchildren. The name Reynolds became synonymous with quality horses, honest dealing, and good neighbors throughout Oregon. Henry returned from medical school in 1895 and set up practice in Oregon City, just as he had promised. He married a girl he had met back east, a doctor's daughter who had trained as a nurse, and they made a formidable team serving the medical needs of the growing community. Molly and her husband expanded the school, eventually building a proper schoolhouse that could accommodate 50 students. Martha retired from daily teaching in 1896, at the age of 50, though she still came to the school regularly to help with special lessons and to simply be around the children she loved. This gave Martha and Lucas more time together, and they used it to travel a bit, visiting friends and family in Oregon City, and even taking a trip to San Francisco, which they found exciting but ultimately overwhelming. They were country people at heart, and they were always glad to return to their valley, to their home. In 1898, they celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary with a party that seemed to include half the territory. People came from miles around to honor the couple who had become something of a legend in the area. Their love story told and retold as an example of what was possible when two people were brave enough to take a chance on each other. At the party, Lucas stood up to make a toast, and the entire room fell silent to hear him speak. 30 years ago, he began, his voice still strong though his hair was now completely silver. I was riding home at sunset when I came across a woman stopped at the boundary of my land. She was tired and scared and alone, but she was also the strongest, most determined person I had ever met. I invited her to cross into my land, and I promised her she would never feel unwelcome again. I had no idea at the time that I was inviting the love of my life, my best friend, my partner in everything, to step into my world and change it forever. He turned to look at Martha, who was sitting beside him with tears streaming down her face. "Martha, you have made me the luckiest man alive. You have given me more joy, more love, more purpose than I ever imagined possible. You have been my companion through every adventure, my comfort through every hardship, my celebration through every triumph. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who had nothing to offer but his heart. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me." The room erupted in applause and tears, and Martha stood to embrace her husband, holding him tight as if she would never let go. "I love you," she whispered in his ear, today, tomorrow, and forever. Lucas and Martha continued their life together, growing old gracefully surrounded by their family and the community they had helped build. They celebrated the birth of great-grandchildren, attended weddings and christenings, and served as the wise elders of the valley, offering counsel and support to anyone who needed it. In the spring of 1903, Lucas fell ill with pneumonia. Martha nursed him tirelessly, sitting by his bedside day and night, holding his hand and talking to him, reminding him of all the beautiful moments they had shared. Henry came home from Oregon City to provide medical care, and the whole family gathered, knowing that Lucas was fighting for his life. But Lucas was strong, as he had always been, and after 2 weeks of illness, he began to recover. When he was finally well enough to sit up and take notice of his surroundings, he looked at Martha and smiled. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," he said, his voice hoarse but filled with his usual humor. "We have too many more sunsets to watch together." "That is right," Martha said, crying and laughing at the same time. "You promised me forever, Lucas Reynolds, and I am holding you to that." Lucas recovered fully, though the illness had weakened him and he was not able to work as hard as he once had. But he did not mind. He had capable sons and grandsons to handle the heavy work, and he was content to spend his days with Martha, enjoying the life they had built and the family they had created. On a warm evening in June of 1905, Lucas and Martha took one of their customary walks to the old boundary marker where they had first met. They went there often, this place that held such meaning for them, and they always felt renewed by visiting it. As they stood there, Lucas looking west toward the setting sun and Martha looking at the home they could just see in the distance, he suddenly spoke. "You know what I think about when I come here?" "What?" Martha asked, moving close to him and taking his hand. "I think about how blessed I am. How one moment, one decision to ride out that evening led to every good thing in my life. I think about the man I was before I met you, and the man I became because I loved you. I think about our children and our grandchildren and the legacy we are leaving. And I think about how, if I could go back and tell that young cowboy what his life would become, he would never believe it. He would never believe he could be this happy, this fulfilled, this loved." Martha leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid strength of him, the warmth that had been her comfort for 37 years. "I feel the same way. That scared young woman who stopped at this boundary line never imagined she would find love like this, build a life like this. You gave me everything, Lucas. A home, a family, a purpose, and above all, love. So much love that sometimes I think my heart cannot contain it all." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and they both felt the peace and contentment that comes from a life well lived, from love fully given and received, from knowing that whatever time they had left, they would spend it together. Lucas lived another 15 years, passing away peacefully in his sleep in 1920 at the age of 77. Martha, devastated by the loss of her beloved husband, struggled for a time with grief. But her family rallied around her, reminding her that Lucas would want her to continue living fully, to continue finding joy in each day. Martha found comfort in her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the school that still bore her name, even though she no longer taught there, in the community that had been her home for more than 50 years. She told stories about Lucas to anyone who would listen, keeping his memory alive and passing on the lessons he had taught her about love, courage, and kindness. She continued to visit the old boundary marker regularly, sometimes alone and sometimes accompanied by family members who understood that this place was sacred to her. She would stand there and remember that fateful evening when a cowboy had appeared out of the sunset and changed her life forever. Martha Bennett Reynolds lived to the age of 82, passing away quietly in 1930, surrounded by 3 generations of the family she and Lucas had created. At her funeral, which was attended by hundreds of people from across Oregon, her grandson Laurie Jr. spoke about his grandparents' love story. "They showed us what real love looks like," he said. "Not the easy kind that fades when times get hard, but the enduring kind that grows stronger with each passing year. They showed us how to build a life together, how to support each other, how to face challenges as partners. They showed us that when you find the right person, the person you are meant to be with, you do whatever it takes to hold on to them and build a life worthy of that love. My grandmother used to say that my grandfather saved her when he found her at that boundary line. But he always said that she saved him too, by giving his life meaning and purpose. They saved each other, and in doing so, they created something beautiful that will last for generations." Martha was buried next to Lucas in the family cemetery on a hill overlooking the valley they had loved. Their headstone was simple, bearing their names, their dates, and a single line that their children had chosen: "Together forever, as they always were." The legacy of Martha and Lucas Reynolds lived on in their descendants, who continued to work the land and serve the community for generations. The story of how they met, of the cowboy who found a woman at the boundary and promised she would never feel unwelcome again, became part of the valley's folklore, told and retold as an example of true love and the power of kindness. The old boundary marker eventually fell over and was lost to time, but it did not matter. The boundary between the 2 properties had long since ceased to exist, merged as they were by marriage and love. And the real boundary that had mattered, the one between being alone and being loved, between despair and hope, between a life half-lived and a life fully embraced, that boundary had been crossed on that evening in 1868, when Lucas Reynolds extended his hand to Martha Bennett and invited her into his life. Their great-great-grandchildren still live in the valley, still work the land, still tell the stories of the ancestors who built something lasting out of courage, love, and an unwavering commitment to each other. The Reynolds name is still synonymous with quality and integrity throughout Oregon, and the school that Martha founded still educates children more than a century after she first began teaching reading and writing in a small cabin by a creek. And sometimes, on summer evenings when the sun sets in shades of amber and gold, locals say you can see the ghosts of a cowboy and a woman standing where the old boundary marker used to be, holding hands and watching the sunset together, their love transcending even death, eternal and unbreakable as it always was. The story of Martha and Lucas became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of taking chances, of opening your heart even when you are scared, of believing that love can bloom in the most unexpected places and endure through every challenge life throws at it. It became a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys are not the ones we plan, but the ones that happen when we are brave enough to accept an invitation from a stranger who sees something in us worth knowing, worth protecting, worth loving. Their children grew old telling the story of how their parents met, and their grandchildren told it to their own children, and it was passed down through the generations, changing slightly with each telling, but always keeping the essential truth at its core. That love, real love, the kind that builds lives and creates legacies, often begins with a simple act of kindness from one person to another. It begins with someone saying, in word or deed, "You are welcome here. You are safe here. You belong here." Lucas Reynolds said those words to Martha Bennett on a summer evening in 1868 when he promised her she would never feel unwelcome on his land. He had no way of knowing that she would make his land her home, his family her family, his dreams her dreams, and his heart her permanent dwelling place. He could not have known that the simple act of helping a stranger would lead to the greatest love story the valley had ever known. But that is how the best love stories begin, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with small kindnesses, with open hearts, with the willingness to see the potential in someone else and invite them into your life. Martha and Lucas understood this instinctively, and they built their entire relationship on a foundation of mutual respect, genuine partnership, and a love that grew deeper and stronger with each passing day. The Double R Ranch, now run by Lucas and Martha's great-grandson, still stands as a monument to their legacy. The house has been expanded and modernized over the years, but the original cabin that Martha and Lucas lived in still stands, preserved as a family museum of sorts, filled with artifacts from their life together. Visitors can see Martha's teaching supplies, Lucas's horse breeding records, photographs of the family through the generations, and most precious of all, a stack of letters that Lucas and Martha wrote to each other during the few times they were separated by travel or circumstances. These letters, carefully preserved by their descendants, reveal the depth of their love in ways that stories never could. They show two people who genuinely liked each other as much as they loved each other, who were interested in each other's thoughts and dreams, who supported each other's ambitions, and who never took each other for granted. In one letter, written by Lucas to Martha during a 3-week trip he had to take to buy horses in California, he wrote, "My dearest Martha, I have been gone only for days, and already I miss you more than I can express. I miss your laugh, your smile, the way you hum while you work, the way you always know exactly what I am thinking before I say it. I miss the feeling of your hand in mine, the sound of your voice reading to our children, the sight of you standing on our porch in the morning light. I miss everything about you, and I am counting the days until I can return to your arms. You are my home, Martha. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." And Martha's response, "My darling Lucas, I miss you just as terribly. The house feels empty without you, and the bed is cold despite the summer heat. Our children ask for you constantly, and I tell them their papa will return soon, bearing gifts and stories. But the truth is, we do not need gifts or stories. We just need you, your presence, your love, your steady strength that makes everything better. Come home safely to me, my love. Come home and never leave again, and we will grow old together watching sunsets from our porch, holding hands and counting our blessings." These letters, and dozens more like them, paint a picture of a marriage that was truly a partnership, a joining not just of lives but of souls. They show two people who chose each other every single day, who worked through disagreements with respect and patience, who celebrated each other's victories and mourned each other's losses, who built something beautiful and lasting because they were willing to put in the work that real love requires. The legacy of Martha and Lucas Reynolds is not just in the land they claimed, and the family they raised, and the community they helped build. Their legacy is in the example they set of what love can be when two people commit fully to each other, when they face life as true partners, when they build on a foundation of kindness, respect, and unwavering devotion. And it all began on that summer evening in 1868, when a cowboy met a woman at the boundary of his land and said the words that would change both their lives forever. "Cross into my land, and you will never feel unwelcome again." She crossed that boundary, and in doing so, she crossed into a love that would last not just a lifetime but for generations, a love that would become legend, a love that would prove that sometimes The best adventures begin when we are brave enough to accept an invitation from a kind stranger who sees our worth and offers us a place to belong. Their story ended, as all stories must, with death and goodbyes. But it also never ended, living on in the hearts and minds of all who knew them, all who heard their tale, all who believed in the power of love to transform lives and create something beautiful out of loneliness and loss. Martha and Lucas Reynolds showed the world that love, real love, begins with an open heart and a generous spirit, and that when you find someone worth loving, you hold on to them with everything you have and you build a life together that will stand the test of time. That is the true ending to their story, and also the true beginning, because love like theirs never really ends. It simply transforms, becoming part of the legacy we leave, part of the hope we give to future generations that they too might find a love like this, a partnership like this, a life like this. And perhaps if they are very lucky and very brave, they will find someone who looks at them the way Lucas looked at Martha, with eyes full of love and promise, and says, "You are welcome here. You are safe here. You belong here. Cross into my life and you will never feel unwelcome again."